Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a project that really captures the spirit of DIY ingenuity today.
Mm.
One of our listeners shared an audio walkthrough, basically, of how they took something super simple, really common, like a plastic storage container.
Yeah, the kind you probably have lying around.
Exactly, stacking up in the garage or whatever,
Hmm.
and they transformed it into a fully functional indoor growing system.
That's right. And the source material, it's essentially a step-by-step guide. It details not just what they did, but, why they made certain choices,
Okay.
the tools that were maybe unexpectedly useful, and some pretty clever workarounds they figured out along the way.
Right. And so our mission here in this deep dive is to pull out those key insights for you. We'll walk through the practical steps,
Yeah.
highlight the clever hacks, the things born from actual experience, and really get to the heart of what makes this system work, what makes it effective. It's all based on the builder's own words, their own process.
And it's just a fantastic example, isn't it? How you can take readily available, pretty inexpensive components
Hmm.
and with a bit of know-how, maybe some patience, create something incredibly useful, something really tailored to what you need rather than just, buying something off the shelf.
Exactly. And there's definitely, as the builder said, more fun in it, right? Building it yourself.
Oh, totally.
So where do you even begin? Turning a plastic box into a mini greenhouse. It starts with that core thing,
Yeah.
the container itself.
Yeah.
Our source mentions grabbing a standard one, $7.99 from a hardware shop.
Right. Just your basic plastic tote. And the other key ingredients mentioned, well, there are LED sockets, which the builder found surprisingly cheap, actually. £5.90 for 10 off eBay.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, some small bits of wood, probably for mounting stuff. 12V cooling fan, things called self-tappers.
Self-tapping screws.
Exactly. An electrical block, some wire, and obviously a drill.
And you immediately get that feeling from the source, that sense of the personal journey involved.
Mhm.
The builder explicitly talks about, the fun of it compared to just plugging in something pre-made.
Yeah, it's about the process.
The process as much as the end result.
Absolutely. The challenge, the learning, it adds a whole different dimension, doesn't it?
It really does. And speaking of making the job easier,
Hmm.
the tools. Let's talk about the tools that were really essential here. The source highlights a couple that sort of stood out.
Yeah, there's one tool the builder couldn't remember the specific name for, but immediately called it a favorite tool.
Okay.
They described how it works, like starting small and then creating bigger holes step by step. Said it goes through the stages to a larger hole. Based on that description, it sounds exactly like a step drill.
A step drill. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, especially for plastic.
Yeah.
You start tiny and just gradually widen it out.
Right.
Less stress on the plastic, less likely to crack it.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Way more control than just
Yeah.
trying to ram a big drill bit through plastic.
Definitely.
And then there was another tool found lurking in the garage, apparently, called Another Godsend.
Chuckles slightly.
Yeah.
Described as doing an amazing job on something, even if it took a bit of time. We don't know exactly what that mystery tool was, but it kind of highlights how you can often just repurpose things you already have lying around,
Resourcefulness. It's key in DIY, isn't it?
Totally.
All right, so armed with tools, materials, the first big job described in the source is getting the ventilation set up.
Yeah, ventilation's crucial. You've got heat from the lights to manage, and the plants need fresh air too.
Right.
So the first step was mounting the fan. That's the exhaust. The builder described holding the fan in place, drilling pilot holes with a very small drill bit.
Okay.
And they really stressed doing this carefully. Said, don't want to push hard because, yeah, pushing too hard is how you crack that plastic box.
Good tip. Very practical advice there.
Definitely. Then they used those self-tappers, the self-tapping screws.
Right. In the corners to help line up the holes for the main fan opening and for cutting out that actual big hole for the fan itself.
Let me guess. The favorite tool.
You got it. The step drill came back out.
This is where that sort of incremental drilling really pays off.
It does, and the builder noted this step does take a while. It involves going round and round, basically wearing through the plastic bit by bit.
Patience is needed then.
Yeah. But the crucial goal, they emphasized, is making sure that fan can spin freely inside the hole. No obstructions, so the air can actually get out properly.
Okay, so that handles getting the hot air out. But
Right.
if the lid's on, how did the fresh air get in?
Good point. That's the other side of ventilation, the air intake. The builder just created holes along the box edge, for passive airflow.
Okay, just drilled holes?
Pretty much. They used a ruler, or get this, even a template ruler they'd made from a previous build.
Ah, clever.
Yeah, to mark out where these intake holes would go. Then used a trusty little pilot drill, their words, to make those smaller holes around the base.
There's a funny little aside in the source about that trusty little pilot drill.
Yeah.
The builder mentions their housemate bought it,
Uh-huh.
making them wonder if it was maybe a not-so-subtle hint.
Slight chuckle. Maybe. Sometimes the universe, or your housemate, provides the tools you need, perhaps with a bit of passive-aggressive prompting.
Could be. Okay, so ventilation's planned out. Next big step, setting up the lights.
Oh, yeah.
LEDs, right? Less heat. Important in a plastic box.
Exactly. LEDs are ideal. The source mentions using specific LED sockets, ones that have little cutout bits for the wires.
Right.
And a really critical piece of practical advice, clearly from experience, was about consistency when you're wiring up multiple sockets.
Okay, how so?
Keeping the positive side the same way for all of them. Or, they suggested, if you're not sure, just mark it. Mark the positive end clearly so you don't get them mixed up later.
Right, consistency just simplifies everything down the line.
Smart. And didn't they mention a specific technique for actually connecting the wires to these sockets, something they learned from before? Yes, soldering. The builder explained that on a previous project, they found the little individual wire strands. They kept coming apart when trying to just push them into the sockets.
That's fiddly.
Yeah. So soldering the ends of the wires first makes them stiff and solid. Much easier to push into the socket cleanly, makes a reliable connection, one that won't just pull apart easily.
That's a great example, isn't it? How, like, failure or frustration in one project teaches you a better way for the next one.
Exactly. Learning from past mistakes, core part of DIY.
Absolutely. Okay, so lights wired, fan mounted. Now, connecting that fan itself, these 12V cooling fans, they often don't just come with a standard plug, do they?
No, they usually don't. So the solution described in the source was using these small DC power supply sockets, or plugs, you know the kind.
Like for old electronics, power bricks.
Exactly. For 12V, 6V, stuff like that. Apparently they're readily available, really cheap off eBay, the builder noted.
Handy.
And the connection is simple. Just connect the fan up to one of these sockets and bob your uncle. Easy peasy.
Nice and simple. But here's where a really key insight from testing came in, according to the source.
Yeah, this is fascinating, actually. So while these fans are typically rated, 12 volts, the builder found that running them at their full 12V whack, maybe from like a server unit power supply, made them really give it some.
Like too powerful.
Yeah, basically too much and definitely too noisy for this kind of small box setup. The crucial finding was that a lower voltage power supply, like 6 volts, or even 9 volts, is actually better.
Lower voltage means less noise, I guess?
Precisely. At 6V or 9V, the builder described them as running lovely, not too noisy, not too manic.
Okay.
And critically, they found that this reduced speed was still, and this is the key part, just enough power, enough to create a little breeze going past my fingers into that box.
Ah, so you don't need a gale force wind in there.
Exactly. That little breeze is all that's needed to get rid of the heat from the LEDs and just keep the air moving around the plants. The source even offers a direct comparison, saying the noise difference between using a 9V and a 12V supply was really significant.
So it's not about maximum power, it's about optimal airflow for the specific need. That's a really smart optimization. Saves on noise, maybe even a bit of power too.
Definitely a very practical takeaway for anyone messing around with these kinds of fans.
For sure. And then we get to the exciting bit, the finishing touches and actually seeing the results.
Yeah. The source mentions some practical final steps like using tie wraps, cable ties to tidy up the leads.
An idea.
Stop them getting yanked accidentally. And also adding reflective material inside the box, that's pretty standard, helps maximize the light reaching the plants.
Makes sense. And the ultimate proof of concept, the working box shown in the source, filled with thriving plants.
Yes. The builder proudly points out examples growing in a box they'd built before. Tomatoes, lettuces, as they called them.
Chuckles, lettuces.
Beetroot, peppers, and even some melon seeds apparently doing well.
Wow, it sounds like a proper little indoor garden oasis. And it's clear the experimentation doesn't just stop once the box is, functional.
No, not at all. The source describes them actively experimenting with different light bulbs in that older box.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
They're comparing 6,400 Kelvin bulbs, that's sort of cool white, often good for leafy growth,
Right.
comparing those against LED, dual spectrum, red and green, whatever, bulbs, which are probably those Blurple grow lights targeting specific photosynthesis wavelengths.
To see which works best.
Yeah, exactly, to see which type performs better for different plants, presumably. Always tweaking, always learning.
That really highlights the ongoing learning, doesn't it? The tweaking that's so rewarding in these kinds of DIY projects. Okay, so let's bring it back. Why does taking a deep dive into this specific DIY Growbox project matter to you, the listener?
Well, because I think this project offers a really accessible, pretty cost-effective way to get around common problems, like maybe not having outdoor space, or living somewhere with an unfavorable climate. It lets you grow things indoors.
Yeah, it beautifully illustrates how you can combine just everyday items, readily available electronic bits, with a little bit of ingenuity
Mm-hmm.
to create something genuinely functional, something tailored to your own needs.
Yeah,
You don't necessarily need fancy, expensive setups to start growing your own stuff.
exactly. It's about seeing the potential in things around you, solving problems creatively. It sort of demystifies controlled environment growing, but on a really small, manageable scale.
Right. So we've walked through the essentials of building this pretty clever indoor grow box from just a plastic container. From the basic bits and pieces, choosing the right tools like that helpful step drill,
Yeah, the favorite tool.
through the crucial steps like building the ventilation,
Yeah.
wiring the lights, incorporating those lessons learned like soldering wires, optimizing the fan voltage,
Little tricks of the trade.
and finally seeing the results, a thriving indoor garden.
It's a great little case study in just iteration and continuous improvement in DIY.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the final thought to maybe leave you with, sort of echoing the builder's own approach here, is this. This project, it's less about just making a box, right? It's more about creating and controlling a tiny environment for life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Builder isn't just growing plants. They're actively experimenting, trying those different light bulbs, seeing what works best. So the question for you is, what possibilities does controlling variables like light, air, space open up for your own growing ambitions? What might you want to try?
Yeah, and what happens when you start tweaking just one little thing, like trying a different type of light or adjusting the airflow slightly? What difference could that make to what you can grow? It's all about that experimentation.